Welcome in, everyone, to this episode of the Batfoot Podcast. My name is Damon, here with my co-hosts David and Matt. Have a jam-packed episode today. Gonna have some smaller moves. We got the reliever market jumping off. We had the qualifying offer deadline coming past. We've had some free agent signings, some trades, non-tenders, and a bunch more to talk about. Before we get to all that, how you doing, David?
I'm doing good. It's good to get the offseason started. It's been a little bit slow, but I think as we hit the winter meetings here next week, things are about to get really exciting. And just following these baseball moves, it's gonna be wild. How we doing, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good. Just had a pretty good week and hanging out. Glad that we're back this week after taking last week off. I'm ready to get started here.
Yeah, I felt like it allowed a lot more stuff to happen. So we have a really packed episode for us to start with, but we'll go ahead and go over to the kind of in chronological order of how things happened a little bit. But we'll start with the Rangers acquiring Jake Odorizzi for Colby Allard. Matt, you know a lot about both these players. Allard used to be a prospect for the Braves. Jake Odorizzi was just on the Braves. They made a trade with each other. So, give us some insight on that one.
Yeah, so this is a trade that works out for both sides. Jake Odorizzi got traded midseason to Atlanta as a after being with Houston last year, and he really struggled with the Braves. His walk rate went up a bit, and just his stuff's just not that good anymore. Had a 5.24 ERA in 46 innings with the Braves. Really got roughed up in several starts. In fact, the only start he really looked good it was his last start, which was the clincher, the division clincher. When he, of course, facing the Marlins, kind of not that big of a deal, but he's going to be he's a solid number 5 piece. For a rotation at this stage, and he had a buyout this year of $6 million on a player option, and a $12 million. The option was worth $12 million. So he went ahead and picked up his option, basically believing that he wasn't going to get anything better than 1 for 6, signing somewhere else. And when he picked up his option, the Braves decided that with the rotation depth they have, they might as well move in with a little and try to save a little bit of money. So they sent $10 million and Jake Odorizzi to the Rangers, who obviously need pitching depth very badly. So it's kind of a win-win there. The Braves saved a couple million, and they got back Colby Allard, who is kind of a quadruple A prospect. There's something. He's a former top prospect. There's some things to like about him, but he's really, really, really struggled, especially at the big league level. He's been a mess at the big league level, and really in Triple A too. He dealt with a lot of injuries after getting drafted early, and then he's just his velocity went away, and I mean his velocity is low 90s, and he's just not. All that great at this stage. Projection systems actually kind of like him, which is kind of interesting. In fact, the Steamer projection system has him with a sub 4 FIP next year, which is kind of interesting. But I definitely think it's just kind of a depth piece. Maybe you can figure something out with him in AAA. It's a guy they're familiar with, and they saved a little bit of cash, and the Rangers get a back into the rotation starter, which is kind of somebody that can eat innings for them, which is something they need. So kind of a win-win.
Yeah, it was an overall solid move for both sides. And then, along with getting Colby Allard and trading Jake Odorizzi away, the Braves made a couple smaller moves as well, re-signing Jesse Chavez to a minor league deal, and then making another bullpen move and signing Nick Anderson, formerly of the Tampa Bay Rays, to a deal that will pay him $875,000 if he's in the majors, and then $180K if he's in the minors. Good buy low candidate, a guy who was a former closer. Had a year or two there where he was one of the best relievers in baseball. So the Rays buying low on a relief pitcher that can help out in that bullpen that, they always consistently seem to have a really good bullpen.
Yeah, Nick Anderson's a guy who in 2019 between two teams had a 235 FIP, a 332 ERA in 65 innings, and in 2020 was outstanding for the Rays with an 0.55 ERA in 16 innings in the shortened season. And he's put up enormous strikeout numbers and very, very low walk rates. During his career so far, he's been one of the best relievers when he's pitched out there. But the thing is when he's pitched, he's been injured a lot. Only pitched 6 innings in 2021, did not pitch in 2022. He's had tons of injuries. So a great buy low candidate. If he's kind of comes back to the 2019-2020 form, he could be an elite piece in that bullpen. If not, then he's, just you're not really risking anything because it's a non-guaranteed contract. So I'm surprised that the Braves got him for this, and great, good buy low.
Yeah, David, you got anything you want to say?
Jesse Chavez stunk with the Cubs last year and then went over to the Braves and was awesome. So him re-signing with the Braves this early is pretty expected, and I think he'll try to make the team out of spring training. That one's an expected move that kind of helps jumpstart the relief pitching market.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jesse Chavez stunk with the Cubs. Got traded to the Braves for Sean Newcomb. Was great with the Braves. Then got traded to the Angels in the Raisel Iglesias trade. Absolutely stunk with the Angels. Got DFA'd, came back to the Braves, and was awesome again. So it's kind of like there's no chance he's gonna pitch anymore if he's not with the Braves. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't expect him to be awesome. I think a little bit of it's probably just a little bit of
So,
regression to the mean on both ends, but it was kind of funny how the Braves
Yeah.
kept getting him back, and he just kept coming in and being good. So
yeah. And then, David, you mentioned really, jump starting the reliever market, and that was kind of really started by the San Diego Padres. They re-signed Robert Suarez to a 5-year, $46 million deal, has an opt-out after the third season, and then also re-signed a guy who was in their bullpen this last year by Nick Martinez in a 3-year, $26 million deal.
Yeah, and I think that Edwin Diaz set the tone for the reliever market and the young relievers who are we're seeing really we're seeing what is prioritized by these big teams, right? You're seeing that velocity is being prioritized with Diaz and Robert Suarez getting huge deals, and we'll talk about Rafael Montero later, but him too. And then we're also seeing innings being prioritized. Nick Martinez was able to be kind of a swingman last year. He pitched 100 innings. He started 10 games. He also came out of the bullpen for a bunch of games. So the flexibility of Nick Martinez gets him a longer term deal coming out of Mexico. He'd been, or I think he actually was overseas in like Korea or Japan. But Martinez come back. He had success this year. He's more that swingman, flexible role. The Padres bringing him back. They want that in their bullpen to assist with their starting pitching because it is a little bit older and a little bit more fickle. But then like Robert Suarez was a fireballer. He was their lockdown guy coming down the stretch, even after they required Josh Hader. So he was their like seventh, eighth inning stopper, and he's the one from Mexico. And this is a guy who had been really dominant this season, and he's pretty much a relative unknown after that. So to guarantee him $46 million is pretty a pretty astounding trade. I don't think he was going to get that from anyone else, but the Padres are pretty intent on locking their guy up here.
yeah, yeah. If I can add, I was gonna say I really really think that was a he might end up being great, but that was a dumb contract to sign Robert Suarez to a 5-year deal. I mean, he is he's good. He was very good this year, and I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he's a good pitcher, but like David said, they're prioritizing velocity. He throws hard, but his peripherals were. I mean, they're good, but they're not like he's gonna get paid closer money, and his peripherals were not closer worthy. I mean, he was a guy who's probably his expected numbers are all in the 3.2 to 3.3 range ERA, which he had a 2.27 ERA last year, and then his he only pitched 47 innings, and that's his entire career number. He's pitched 47 innings in his entire career. So, and he's age 31. I know he throws hard, and he was really good in the postseason, but um, it just seems like paying him almost $10 million a year almost is kind of uh, crazy. And even then, like if he hits and does really well and he's worth that contract, he's gone after 3. So it's like that just seems to me like a really really bad contract. And then the Nick Martinez thing, I'm fine with that. You're paying him. It's kind of like the Jake Odorizzi thing. You're paying him, about $8.5 million on a for a fit number 5 starter / swingman type guy. I think that's perfectly fine, and that's a good deal. But I really don't understand the Robert Suarez contract. I think that's really, I mean, uh, you know, a little under $10 million isn't going to kill you if it's bad, but that still to me was a little bit too much. So
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward with him, because they have Josh Hader through this year, and then after that, if they could potentially move Suarez to the closer's role at that point. Maybe the deal doesn't look as bad at that point, but like you mentioned, it's a head scratching deal. Kind of just looking at the 1 year, with how volatile major league relievers can be. And being a 31-year-old reliever, you're just not sure if he's going to have that same kind of production um, moving forward.
Yeah.
But staying in that reliever market, talking about a guy who got paid. You're talking about Rafael Montero re-signing with the Houston Astros, 3-year, $34.5 million deal. A guy who struggled a lot, bounced around through a few places, and then went to the Astros this year and had a really electric season. And they decide to prepay him.
Yeah, same thing here with Rafael Montero, another guy who's got like the 90th percentile and above fastball velocity and spin rates. But if Houston's paying somebody, I think they've figured out what's making that guy tick. And when you look at Rafael Montero's Baseball Savant page, the numbers are all way in the red. He's got that high velocity whiff rate type of profile that the Astros are known for developing, and so to finally hit on a guy and then pay him $10 million a year, it's the same type of thing here where how much is a really good relief pitching worth. And we're seeing with Suarez, Montero, and Edwin Diaz that this market is saying, really good relief pitching, you can kind of pay for it if you have that cash. If the rest of your roster is kind of set, I don't think you can overspend for it. But like Matt said, the volatility of relievers in Major League Baseball is extremely high. And it gets really egregious really quickly if you're trying to pay $10 million to a guy who loses the strike zone.
yeah, and I mean Montero is the same thing as Suarez to me. It's not quite as long of a deal, only 3 years, but it's real similar. I mean, this is a guy who from 2014 to 2021, had one season with a sub 3 ERA in 2019, in which he only pitched 29 innings. And other than that, I mean, he was above a 4 every year, ERA wise. Started off with the Mets. Actually spent part of the season as a started part of the season as a starter in 2017. I think he was actually a former high end prospect when he came up with the Mets back in 2014. But he's had one good year. I mean, he went to Houston and they figured some things out with him. His fastball velocity went up some. He worked on some things and had a really good year. Now, could he do it again? Probably is possible. His peripherals were a lot better than Suarez's last year, but at the same time, you're talking about a guy who, I mean, 2021 had a 6.40 ERA, and you're talking about signing him to a $10 million a year deal as a reliever who's 32 years old when the season starts. So, I mean, I think he's probably got a better shot at keeping this up than Suarez does, but at the same time, like to me, it just seems like I probably wouldn't have done that, but I mean, that's just me. I am also snake bit by having watched Will Smith pitch for the Braves for 3 years and how that contract turned out, signing a reliever like that. I mean, you just never know with relievers. I mean, it's just one of those things. So, but we'll see what happens. You never know. He might end up doing great. So for 3 years, but it just seems like especially for teams that are pretty high in payroll already, and not a team that's gonna not a super high spending team either. I mean, the Astros usually are one of those teams that kind of butts up against the luxury tax but doesn't go into it. I mean, paying $10 million is going to hurt, if it's not a elite player, so or elite reliever. So we'll see what happens with this.
I only truly disagree with one thing you said there is that you kind of brought up the Will Smith comparison. Robert Suarez and Rafael Montero both throw 98 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
And they both throw 70% fastballs. It's not nearly the same thing. If they stop doing that, there will be a problem. But as long as those guys are
Yeah,
pumping 98, they'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, the stuff is different, but I think the track record, of Will Smith too. I mean, he had been a closer for like, or maybe not a closer, but like a high level elite reliever for like 3 or 4 years in a row before the Braves
Yeah.
signed him, and that contract went badly. These guys have had a track record of like 50 innings of being
Yeah.
good in the big leagues. I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on somebody who's been good for 50 innings.
Well, maybe my only thought before we try to move on here is that wouldn't you want if you're worried about the track record of Will Smith forcing you into overpaying, are the Padres and the Astros looking to get maybe the continued ascension of a couple of guys they believe in? And I think that's probably what they're paying for here is guys who are on the rise, right? Where they know they've got a few more adjustments they can make, a little more fastball spin they can unlock, something to that effect in order to get more success out of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, but when you're paying them as much as they're going to pay them, 10 million a year for a reliever, that seems to me like that's paying the numbers of a guy who would have a really good track record. I mean,
Yeah,
it's more of like if they were paying him, signing him to a multi-year deal that paid him, 2 years in a club option and paid him 7 million or something. Like maybe that's different, but I mean, you're signing a guy Robert Suarez to a 5-year deal, who's been paying him 10 million a year,
hmm,
off of a 40 inning sample size. I mean, it's just. I mean, I know the analytics on it are good and stuff, but the track records, I mean, of that is, I mean, they could lose it like immediately. I mean, you're
right,
looking at Rafael Montero, who's a guy who's, I mean, like I say, his best season in the big leagues was 2022. Before that, he had a sub 4 ERA one time, and it was in 29 innings in 2019.
right,
So I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Like I say, they might turn out great, and it's possible that Rafael Montero next year pitches like Edwin Diaz did this year, and that $10 million a year is what the Mets are paying $20 million a year for. But it's you never know with relievers, but it's for me, it's just that's a lot of money to pay relievers,
hmm,
and with the volatility of relievers to start with, and even them guys with a very short track record too. So, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how these turn out.
Yeah, so one thing about that deal, which it kind of leads into the next point that we're going to talk about there is who's really making the decisions in Houston, anyways, because they've now seen their general manager James Click, who was just the World Series winning general manager. They offered him a 1 year extension to come back, and he has declined that. So as of right now, Houston doesn't have a GM, and I believe it's actually just Jim Crane that's actually operating the negotiations and stuff. If you guys have seen anything else about that, let me know. But I haven't seen anybody else that was supposedly in charge of that.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I saw something where they were, criticizing Crane and saying he was trying to be the next Jerry Jones. So I guess he's running things right now. So
Yeah, I mean, and he's the one that makes that call after watching the
yeah,
2022, and he's given that the reliever $10 million at
yeah,
that point. I mean, it's a head scratching move because now they don't have anybody there. It wasn't sure after winning the World Series. I mean, who was going to be the GM? We still don't know. There's rumblings about possibly David Stearns, but David Stearns has turned that down and saying that he's happy just to stay in an advisory role and doesn't want the day-to-day grind as much as what he was doing with Milwaukee beforehand. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, with Houston moving forward in the general manager, president of baseball
yeah,
operations role.
yeah. And didn't didn't they? And David would probably know this because I think it was actually Wilson Contreras, wasn't it? That basically Crane
Yep.
vetoed the trade.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was.
Wilson Contreras for Jose Urquidy at the deadline. They had it locked in until I think 2 hours before because the Christian Vasquez deal came together kind of quick right at the deadline, and yeah, it was Wilson Contreras for Jose Urquidy straight up. Dusty Baker got with Jim Crane and talked him into vetoing it. So um, yeah, I as a Cubs fan, I'm a little disappointed by that one because Urquidy was kind of a controlled starting pitcher. He's not like an upper end guy or anything, but boy, that sure would have helped us going forward into this season. Now they've kind of got that role to fill as well as something in the top of the rotation. So yeah, it's got to be Jim Crane then. You'd think that is making that kind of call.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, throughout this offseason and into the into next season. If they still don't have anybody, around the trade deadline or whatever, what that's going to look like. But a little small move that we had happen was, when the roster crunch was coming for the non-tender deadline, which we'll talk about those names that got non-tendered a little later. The Tampa Bay Rays ended up trading first baseman G-Man Choi to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I believe it was just for cash considerations, just a roster crunch thing, but a notable name at least.
This stinks. G-Man Choi is really good. He's going to face the Cubs a bunch next year, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, G-Man Choi is a guy with a long track record. It's a really good, platoon bat against right-handed pitching. That's why the Rays had him, because he's a great platoon bat, and that's what the Rays do, is get great platoon bats. And I guess they're just wanting to have a spot maybe for Isaac Paredes to play every day, or I'm not exactly sure. I know they needed a 40-man spot. They always have that crunch every year, but they moved on from G-Man Choi, who I think was very well liked there in
Yeah,
their
he was.
clubhouse, and I don't really understand too much why they moved on from him specifically, but I mean, I guess if you're the Rays, I'm sure they got something in the plans lined up, so because they always do. But I'm not gonna sit here and doubt the Rays anymore. But yeah, I was a little
Yeah.
confused about this. So
The only
Yeah,
thing to doubt about the Rays is their consistent method of not ignoring the player for the it's ignoring the player for the numbers basically. G-Man Choi said he wanted to retire as a Ray, and they shipped him to Pittsburgh, which is like the worst place you could send him. So
yeah,
yeah. I think what it was is just the ARB numbers. Really, he was getting ready to enter his last 2 years of ARB or something. That's
yeah,
when they get their big raises. So the
I mean
Rays
they
always
could.
pension the pennies or whatever. But
You'd think the Rays could have worked out like a team friendly
yeah,
extension,
I mean, you would think, but it's
but
also the Rays. I mean, they work mysteriously.
they do.
Um, so let's go ahead and jump over to our next portion, and it's going to be with the qualifying offers in with it. So looking at the list of names of the qualifying offer people, we had Aaron Judge, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Jacob DeGrom, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Rodon, Brendan Nimmo, Wilson Contreras, Chris Bassett, Anthony Rizzo, Nathan Eovaldi, Martin Perez, Jock Peterson, and Tyler Anderson. Now, only two of those players actually accepted the qualifying offer, that being Martin Perez and Jock Peterson. And then one of them, which is Tyler Anderson, decided to sign right before the deadline with the Angels. So we'll go ahead and start with Anderson, and then we'll jump back to the other two. But Tyler Anderson signs a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels.
yeah. This is a pretty interesting deal. The Angels, everyone knows that the Angels need pitching, and I think Tyler Anderson is a pretty good arm on the market. He's not a high strikeout guy, but he doesn't walk many guys. He's doesn't give up a lot of hard contact. Um, I know he had a great year for the Dodgers. He had a 2.57 ERA. His peripherals don't back that up. His peripherals do say he was really good. He's kind of a number 4 starter, probably maybe improved enough in 2022 stuff wise to become more of a number 3 starter. I mean, we'll see how it works out for the Angels. 13 million a year for 3 years for a number 3 or 4 starters, not too bad value. It's probably exactly how he should be valued. I was a little bit surprised he turned down the qualifying offer. Honestly, I thought that he might take the one for, I think it's one for 19 and a half this year.
It's right
And
around there, yeah.
yeah, and I was a little surprised he turned that down. I mean, obviously, you know, he's going to get paid $39 million now instead of $20 million. So, but I think I guess he didn't feel like betting on himself was the right move, and he'd rather have that guaranteed, extra money, which I think is fair. But we'll see what happens with him. I think it's a pretty good move for the Angels. They obviously needed pitching, and they kind of went ahead, jumped on it, got a head start on that market, and I think they got a pretty fair deal on both sides there.
Yeah, just listening to his press conference from it, he said he had negotiations with multiple teams. He wanted to sign before the trade or the qualifying offer deadline, so he had that to fall back into. But he said the Angels were the only team to go to 3 years for him, and that's really what he wanted. As soon as he got that third year, it was pretty much a locked in from that point. He did say he had discussions on 2-year deals with the Dodgers, but for it would have been roughly around the same AAV, but the third year is really the protection that he wanted.
That's it's one of those things where I don't believe that he's going to repeat those numbers without the Dodgers infield defense behind him there. So
Yeah, if the
just in general,
yeah if the Angels are healthy, they could have good defense in the infield. Because I mean, when Rendon is healthy, he's a good third baseman, and Fletcher's a good defensive player. Of course, part of it also depends on who's playing shortstop too. So we don't know who that is. And this guy, he's a really good fly ball pitcher too. He's only a 40% ground ball guy. So with Trout out there in center, um, I guess they traded their good defender Brandon Marsh. So, um, but
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. So,
Yeah,
One
one
thing.
interesting.
Oh,
Okay,
go ahead, Damien.
let's just say the one interesting thing that I actually just clicked into my head was if he didn't want to bet on himself because of the lack of the shift now,
ooh,
um,
Yep.
because being a
Yep.
soft contact guy, being able to have those shifted infields and that would help the tendencies there. Um, that could be another reason of why pitchers might not want to take as many 1 year deals this year.
especially as a guy who throws a lot of sinkers and doesn't throw
Hmm.
very hard,
Yeah,
he gets a lot of rollovers and flip to the
exactly.
pull side too. He's not just a guy. I mean, if you're somebody who gets a lot of soft contact but they throw really hard, you're going to get a lot of jam shots and nobody knows where it's going to go. So there's
Yep.
maybe not shifted quite as heavily, but or affected quite as heavily by the shift. But this guy is one that could probably be affected pretty heavy by it.
Anyways,
I
Dave, what were you
also
going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna tie this to the other qualifying offers because I did think he should have taken it because another year in front of the Dodgers feels like a win, but he wanted that security obviously. And from the Angels' point of view, this doesn't really make sense because remember, with the qualifying offer, you lose a draft pick if you sign a qualified player. The Angels are not really in a position to be giving up picks because they're still kind of talent void in their system, and then they've spent the last couple of years doing some like I don't want to call them like a meme draft, but last year or 2 years ago they drafted all pitchers.
Yeah.
So this isn't really like an organization that needs to be giving away picks for 3 year deals for 3-4 starters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Listen, it's an upgrade for them because they gave up a pick last year for a half season of Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I was gonna say too. I mean, with the Angels, that this might mean that they want to sign somebody big that's also rejected qualifying offer, another guy. I mean, I don't know which one of them, but there's been a little bit of rumor that they're in maybe want to look at one of the shortstops. Um, so I don't know if that's going to happen, but it doesn't make a lot of sense if your only move is going to be Tyler Anderson to blow your draft pick on that. Like if you're gonna
yeah,
sign him, I mean Syndergaard was even a little bit different. Like because you thought that upside that if he could get back to his old form, he could be like he was an ace before. Tyler Anderson's never been an ace. He's kind of like those relievers we were talking about. He's had one good season. Of course, with him being a starter, you kind of think a little there. Might be a little bit more reliable with that season he had last year. But like it's still. I mean, I don't think they're done if they're going to sign a Tyler Anderson to blow their draft pick. So
yeah.
Yeah. But jumping over to the accepted qualifying offer guys, and we'll go ahead and start with Martin Perez just to stay in the pitching mold. And David and I actually had some conversation about this as it was kind of all being discussed. I think it was a good move for Perez to accept the qualifying offer. A guy who had a career year, and I believe David, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me here. Him accepting the qualifying offer for 19.5 million is over double or close to double what his career earnings have been so far.
Yeah, I think that's what we calc that it was exactly double. But man, I can't believe he got the qualifying offer to begin with, and then on top of that, I mean, what an opportunity to go ahead and grab it. I mean, the Rangers obviously need to lock down pitching, but that didn't seem like a great way to go about it. No brainer for him. No brainer for Jock Peterson too. I am surprised that Chris Bassett and Nathan Eovaldi both turned down the qualifying offer though. They are getting older, but that doesn't seem to matter because the starting pitchers at the higher age can take the 1 year deal for a higher annual average value. So I don't know. It seemed like 20 million. I don't know if those guys are going to get 20 million for even like per year. and I don't foresee any reason for them to fall off. So tying themselves to draft pick loss seems like a weak move. But if Martin Perez had done that, his market would have been Texas and no one. So it's a good move to go ahead and accept that qualifying offer for him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. With Perez, I think, I think it just kind of depends. Like for him, he's betting on himself too, because if his breakout this year, if it was real, he could turn that into a 3-year deal after his age 32 season if he can repeat what he did this past year. There was a little bit of luck involved, but his peripherals were pretty good this year. So, I think he could. He's not going to put up a 2.89 ERA again, but if he puts up a mid threes ERA, if he can do that even, I think that he could turn that into a nice 3-year deal after this season. So I get it for him, and I get it for the Rangers because you're paying a guy who you feel like might be a number 3. You might be overpaying him a little bit, but you've got no risk on it because it's a 1-year deal, and the Rangers have tons of money to spend. He's going to come off the books after this year if he's not good. So I get it from their end. And if he did decide to sign somewhere else, then if you're the Rangers, you get a draft pick. So I kind of get it on their end too. And the Jock Peterson, for a team that's been talking an awful lot about trying to go after Aaron Judge, signing a guy to $20 million, 1 year, $20 million, who's a platoon outfielder, seems a little bit weird. But I mean, I think Jock Peterson plays is a great his role, and I mean he's a great clubhouse guy too. From his year with the Braves that he had, I can tell you, I remember how great of a clubhouse guy is, and I know Damien could probably tell you, and David, he's played for all 3 of our
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah.
how great of a clubhouse guy Jock Peterson is. So he had a good season this year, but I don't see him putting up the same stat line he put up this year. But he's only 30 years old, which is kind of crazy. I thought he was older than that. So.
Well, I love this move for Jock Peterson because of what we were just talking about with Tyler Anderson, the shift being gone. Like
Right.
that's going to open up a lot for Jock Peterson now, and it's a smart move for his market because now that he's taken the qualifying offer, he can't get the qualifying offer again. So if the shift, being gone now does improve what Jock Peterson can do offensively, he goes into the market next year as, a still young 31-year-old with a ton of power and no shift now and no qualifying offer. Like he has a big opportunity this year to really show if he's able to expand that offensively. Not saying he's going to do much more against left-handed pitching, but maybe he's able to up that just enough to be at least playable a little bit because of that shift. But it'll be really interesting. And I think he just fits a lot with the Giants. He's from that Northern California area. He has the history with the GM or the president of baseball operations who was a Dodgers GM, Kapler, who was a minor league assistant or whatever it was as Jock Peterson was coming up through the Dodgers minor league system. So he has a lot of familiarity there as with the team, the front office, and with the area of being close to home. David?
Yeah, I see. Here's the thing. I don't know why the Giants would have. I don't know. I know the Giants wanted to return him, but this is one of those things where it does feel like they're they're outsmarting themselves a little bit. I don't know that betting on Jock Peterson to have a really big breakout season and with the shift limitations is I don't know. If this works, it works. I don't think it prohibits them from signing Judge, but it
No.
does create some of that roster clutter that if you're looking to overhaul your roster, you don't want to run into. Where you can go back to try to sign Jock Peterson if he's still available in February, but he's not make or break in terms of whether or not you want to change your roster outlook. So I'm ultimately a little lukewarm on this move, but from the Giants side, but like for Jock's side, like Jock's been paid $20 million this year. Like, go for it, man. Hell yeah, let's
Yeah.
let's go. Hopefully he breaks out. I did like Jock. I liked when he was with the Cubs. It was cool. So hopefully this is the time where the shift kind of opens up some of these guys that are big pull hitters.
Yeah, and one other point on Jock and Martin Perez is look at the markets
Yeah.
of the positions they're at. I mean,
Yeah.
Jock, the corner outfield market is very cluttered this year. I mean, there's not a bunch of high end guys this year, but there's other than Judge, which he's not really a left fielder or DH guy anyways. But there's Andrew Benintendi, there's Mitch Haniger, there's all kinds of these corner outfielders that are that are good, but not like Jock Peterson
Mhm.
obviously that are good, but not like elite. And then at the starting pitching market though, you're looking at like the two elite guys, Verlander, DeGrom, and then I mean it's not a especially with the need for starting pitching, it's not a great market. So I mean honestly, I feel like Jock Peterson's probably going to get paid more through the qualifying offer than he would have gotten paid on a 1 year deal somewhere else. And then, but Martin Perez, on the other hand, I think, you know, he is going to get paid more, but he could have probably been close to, it probably could have made it a somewhat close decision with some multi-year deals he could have gotten. So I don't know. He probably didn't get the third year like Tyler Anderson did. Probably why Martin Perez would have accepted. But I mean, I think Martin Perez maybe could have gotten a deal that rivals the qualifying offer. He just wanted to bet on himself and go back to Texas too, as opposed to, um, as opposed to taking a multi-year deal and maybe not maximizing his value if he repeats this season. So
Yeah, and he's mentioned that he wants to stay in Texas,
yeah.
anyways, because it's where he started his career. But going over to it was still kind of within that qualifying offer decision. Anthony Rizzo did decline the qualifying offer, but then immediately ended up getting a deal with the Yankees, a 2-year, $34 million deal with a $17 million club option for 2025 that has a $6 million buyout. So it's a 2-year, basically $40 million total guarantee if that buyout is taken by the Yankees.
Yeah, Rizzo's. He loved that short porch last year. He still didn't get to 33 home runs. He's hit 32 home runs like 4 times in his career, but he's never gotten to 33. I really thought it would be the year, but then he got hurt down the stretch and didn't get there. But clearly likes Yankee Stadium, definitely changed up his approach where he's gone from being a kind of all fields guy that he was with the Cubs to a pull power, selling out for that pull power guy. But with the shift being gone, I think Rizzo's batting average is going to shoot up. He's one of those guys who got robbed by that all the time, kind of to where it was egregious. So Rizzo's Rizzo's deal here is it's I think fairly low because it looks like Jose Abreu is going to get like 20, maybe a little more than that, and then you've got the first base market's pretty weak after that. So Trey Mancini, Josh Bell, some of these guys, but I think Rizzo's smart to stick with the Yankees. They're probably the best location for him, and if he's turning down the qualifying offer, this is about the best he's going to do. His back tends to flare up in the middle of the season, but in term for the Yankees, this is the guy they really love. Rizzo's a great clubhouse guy. All the check marks are there. The one thing is that he had a deal with the Cubs before, he was kind of mocking in the media low ball offer the Cubs made him before they traded him in 2021. And it ultimately was more overall money than what he's earned the last couple of years. So, I'm just kind of like, watching him sign a deal for what is this 40 million guaranteed. Like, we offered him 70 million guaranteed and he turned it down. And it's just the kind of thing that, I hate to see him go. The guy caught the final out of the 2016 World Series, but he's happy now. He's clearly in a place that's thriving. So I wish him the best, but, man, it sure does look like he kind of stumbled a little bit there when he didn't sign that contract extension they offered him.
Yeah, you look at Anthony Rizzo as a guy, and the way I look at him, because I look at him a little differently, because I'm not a fan of he's famous for being a Cub. So, but
Oh God,
Oh, did we
we
lose him
lost him.
again?
We lost him.
All right. Well, we don't know what Matt was going to say, but something about Anthony Rizzo. But we'll
Rizzo.
just go ahead. We'll just go ahead and move on. And if he comes back in, we'll pick it up back then. But we'll go ahead and start with the kind of rash of trades that happened kind of all in a row a little bit. And the first one's it's a minor trade when you look at the surface, but once you dig into it, it could be a very big deal. And that's with the Colorado Rockies and Cleveland Guardians swinging a trade. The Colorado Rockies receive Nolan Jones, while the Guardians receive Juan Brito. Nolan Jones is a top 100 prospect on a lot of boards. I mean, I believe on Fangraphs he's still 85 right now. Basically, just didn't have a spot in Cleveland anymore with the the infield really being shored up by Jose Ramirez and Andres Jimenez at second base, Josh Naylor at first base now. So it gets him to Colorado for a place where his power can really go wild, and then they get a solid prospect back in Juan Brito.
Yeah, the thing that this trade tells am I unmuted here? The thing that this trade tells us is that um am I unmuted? I am unmuted.
Yeah, you are.
The thing that this trade tells us is that our prospect lists are not what the industry sees, because Juan Brito is not on any prospect list. He's not on the top 100. Just kind of he was kind of just like a 15th ranked prospect in the organization. But you look at his numbers. The guy averages a 400 on base percentage everywhere he goes, and he's been well above league average as a hitter. He plays second base. He's got speed. He's stolen a bunch of bases, and as a 20-year-old in high A, he was absolutely dominant this year. So the industry is looking at that and seeing, a skilled player, maybe moving him up their leaderboards where, what we have access to isn't necessarily as high. And no, kind of the inverse of that is that Nolan Jones is on everybody's top 100 leaderboards, and the Guardians just shipped him out. I mean, they could have played him at DH, they could have played him at corner outfield, but they moved on from him, and that much is kind of surprising, I think, because a lot of us would have said, "Oh man, Nolan Jones, top 100 player. One, he's going to fetch a lot more than that, and two, he's you know, got a lot of skill, and in Coors now, he may be, one of those guys who can really put it all together." But if the Guardians are shipping him out, man, I think they may really see something wrong with that contact rate.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. In only 94 major league plate appearances, he had that 33% strikeout rate. That's kind of been close to his average throughout his minor league career, but he's always been able to hit enough and walk enough to deal with that. His walk rate was really good. I mean, even through his minor league career, you're talking about close to a 15% average walk rate, and wasn't able to repeat that. But it's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like in Colorado for him, where he's able to play, because they have a really good infield as well. And then what the Juan Brito move looks like for Cleveland if he ends up being a bench batter or a trade opportunity later for them.
Yeah,
But
if I could hop in here, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. My internet, I guess, froze for a second. I don't know. It's been doing that lately. I don't know what's going on with it, but I was going to mention on this trade, Nolan Jones is a guy who he's a super high strikeout guy and poor contact guy, but he hits for a lot of power, but he doesn't hit for his raw power is great, but his game power, he doesn't hit for enough power to overcome the contact rate. I mean, you look at 2021 and 100 games hit 13 homers at AAA. 2022 and 55 games hit 9 homers at AAA. That's like mid 20s home run per season. And if you're striking out 30% of the time and you're pretty much just a power hitter, I know he's got a good walk rate too, but I just don't believe in that. And then obviously the defense, we don't really know where he's going to be able to play. So kind of a guy who he'd have to cut that straight. He'd have to either swing change and really tap into that raw, or he'd have to cut down that strikeout rate a little bit. And he's also he's also what 25 years old almost. So that also doesn't help him because he's kind of getting up there for a prospect. A guy who doesn't have much big league experience. So.
Well, the good news is the Colorado Rockies are famous for being able to, make players better. Well, no, I think he will actually succeed in Colorado to some extent, where the altitude may help his home run rate kind of push up, even though he tends to hit for less in-game power. Hopefully, some of those fly balls he hits are going to get out, and he'll be able to, up that slugging to kind of match the profile.
absolutely. So let's jump on over to our next trade. It's probably the biggest trade that we'll talk about, but that's with the Seattle Mariners and Toronto Blue Jays swinging their trade, with Seattle acquiring Teoscar Hernandez and Toronto receiving relief pitcher Eric Swanson and left-handed pitcher Adam Mako.
I love Teoscar Hernandez, man, and he's a spark plug in an offense. He's hits the ball a ton. One of those guys, very swing heavy, kind of reminds you of a little bit of Javi Baez, but back maybe more when he was making a little more contact. And Teoscar just hammers the ball. One of those guys that's high up there in the exit velocities. Does not have a defensive position at all. And so, the Mariners will look to plug him in at DH and in left field and try to hide him away, kind of like the Blue Jays did. But the Blue Jays were very rich in these types of players between Vlad Jr., Teoscar, Lourdes Gurriel, a bunch of guys who were kind of the first base, left field, DH only type of guys, and all right-handed as well. So we know the Blue Jays are looking to get a little bit more left-handed, and being able to swing Teoscar for a major league reliever, I think, is a reasonable move. But again, we're seeing relievers just get a high value placed on him because Teoscar Hernandez is the kind of guy who can, be carrying an offense for a couple of weeks once he's on. So I like this deal for the Mariners a lot because the Mariners tend to just be pulling relievers out of nowhere. Paul Sewald, Eric Swanson, these types of guys have just kind of shot up out of nowhere, and that's kind of how relievers are born in today's MLB. But at the same time, Adam Macko's a good starting pitching prospect. The Blue Jays are going for their weakness. They're trading from a position of strength. So ultimately, I think this is a good deal for the Blue Jays, but they will miss Teoscar over there.
Yeah, and Teoscar Hernandez, you compared him to Javi Baez. I think a good comparison for Teoscar Hernandez is Marcelo Zuna, before the issues he's had the last couple of years. But he's a guy who, he's very reliant on, BABIP to a certain level, hits a lot of home runs, doesn't walk a lot, but, strikes out a good bit, but his quality of contact is really, really good, hits the ball hard. He can play the outfield, but he's not really good there. He's kind of a below average defender. I think he's a solid player, a good everyday player in a lineup. And I think that, as good as the Mariners were this past year, they need that. I think they really need they're losing Mitch Haniger too. They really need a corner outfield DH type guy that they can count on to hit pretty well and just add some thump to that lineup. But that's what they got here. And I was a little confused about the Blue Jays trading him, but I think the Blue Jays might have a little bit of a master plan here where they want to get a center fielder. I think they want to move George Springer to right field. They want a left-handed hitting center fielder. I think it's kind of what they want because I've heard that there's been rumors out there that they might be in on Brandon Nimmo and Cody Bellinger's out there now too, is left-handed hitting center fielder. So I think that you might look at those couple of those types of guys that they might kind of retool a little bit their outfield by moving Springer and maybe bringing a little bit more defense into center field. Because Springer is still fine out there, but he's not a great defender in center anymore. You can put him in right, and obviously you've got plenty of options for DH there. So I think that I think it's just kind of a move where they're maybe freeing up a little bit of money too. I know Teoscar Hernandez isn't owed a lot of money, but you're freeing up a little bit. He's an ARB guy, so. And then kind of freeing up that spot. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then Eric Swanson, he's real similar to those other relievers we were talking about earlier. Has no track record until 2022, but was awesome in 2022. It's 53 innings. So, we'll see what happens there. He's not quite the same because he's not the high fastball velocity guy like those other guys were. Especially Suarez, averaging 98 on his fastball. But this, he averages 94, which is fine. It's good. Probably an average reliever. Very good. I think he's a very good. I think it's a solid trade for the Mariners, and I think the Blue Jays. It's understandable. Trading a guy like Teoscar Hernandez is not the most fun thing to do for a contender, but I understand why they did it. So.
Yeah. So the big thing is Eric Swanson has I believe it's 3 years or 4 years left of club control, and Teoscar Hernandez is going to be a free agent after next season. So this basically signals to a move to me that the Blue Jays were not going to really look to re-sign Teoscar Hernandez to the type of contract that he was probably going to want. I assume they probably even have had some, extension talks already with him before this trade. And then it opens up with what Matt was saying with wanting to probably potentially move Springer over to right field and get a center fielder there. And it gives them a high leverage kind of relief pitcher and then a solid starting pitching prospect that they can bring in, and that's the thing that they've been really good recently with their young starting pitching as well. But let's jump over to the other trade that involves the Seattle Mariners. It's kind of all within all of this is they acquired an outfielder and then they turned around and traded one away. So the Seattle trades Kyle Lewis to Arizona for outfield slash catcher, more of a catcher, Cooper Hummel.
Yeah, so Kyle Lewis is, I think he was a 2020 AL Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, last year he was hurt and he was ineffective. And Arizona has, I believe, 5 MLB outfielders that are all left-handed and 2 AAA outfielders knocking down the door that are also left-handed. So they really needed to get more right-handed in the outfield. So they go out and get Kyle Lewis. He can play center field. That allows them to kind of probably use him and Corbin Carroll in center. They also have Alec Thomas. They also have Jake McCarthy. All of those guys are all left-handed, and they have Dalton Varsho, who's also left-handed. So they really needed to get more right-handed in the outfield, and I don't think they're done. I think some of those guys could be on the move later, but this is a start, and Cooper Hummel was another one of the. I don't know where they get in these Dalton Varsho and Cooper Hummel, these outfield catcher hybrids. Um, that's a very Arizona thing to have because they're about the only one who has that. So, yeah, Hummel to the Mariners, I think he's like a back end top 100 guy. You heard his name a few times, but I don't know that he'll be more than like league average or anything for Seattle, but they do capitalize, get a decent prospect, I think, at the major league level for Kyle Lewis, which is good value given that he didn't play at all last year and was very ineffective when he did.
Yeah, I agree with on Kyle Lewis. When say he's ineffective last year, he only played in 18 games, but in the 18 games he was not effective. But they just they're just getting Teoscar Hernandez. They've got Julio Rodriguez in center field. They don't really need that. Probably corner outfield is where Kyle Lewis needs to play. Right-handed bat anymore. So I mean, it's worth it to ship him off, and they got somebody interesting in return. So I get that trade 100%. Um, you know, but we'll see. We'll see what happens here. I don't think it's going to end up being that huge of a deal. I mean, Kyle Lewis has some form of value. Maybe he was a former high draft pick, top prospect, had that good 2020 season, even though it's short season, was fine in 2021. It's kind of a guy who's probably should be. Well, he only played 36 games in 2021, and he was fine. So, um, we'll see what happens there. But I don't. I think he's going to probably end up settling into being a decent everyday player that's not like a star or anything, but he's going to be fine as a everyday player. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he'll be fine there. If he can get the injuries under control. I mean, he's dealt with a knee, and then he's dealt with concussion.
yeah,
This last year, he really dealt with I think 2 concussions. Um, like he had one, and I think it was out took him out for like about a month or so, and then he came back, and then it was like not even 2 or 3 games later, he sustained another concussion, like running into the wall. So if he can really get the injuries under control, I think he'll be a solid player. The 30% strikeout rate, right around there for his career, it's not great, but he really hasn't had much time to develop in the major leagues either. I mean, we're talking about 130 career games. That's not even a full season yet. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's been up there for parts of 4 seasons. So I think it's a good move for Arizona. You get a right-handed guy, probably buying low on him, and if you're able to turn him into what he was that 2020 season, you got a steal there, and you're trading a guy who you really didn't have room for there, and then it opens you up to where you have a really good outfield, and then you have some guys that you can potentially move in another deal if you're really wanting to be competitive. But let's go ahead and jump over to our last trade of the episode that we have, and that's with the Los Angeles Angels and the Minnesota Twins making the trade with the Angels acquiring infielder Gio Urshela for prospect Alejandro Hidalgo.
yeah. I was a little surprised at this trade. Gio Urshela he's a kind of like I was talking about earlier with Hernandez. He's a perfectly fine everyday player. Like he's not a star. He's not, like a guy who should be on the bench. He's not a replacement level. He's a perfectly fine everyday player, and he's a decent third baseman defensively. He's a little bit of an above average hitter, probably maybe more average typically, but he's fine. and he's worth it. He's worth being on an MLB lineup. So the Angels need those depth types of pieces. I don't know what this really means with Rendon, but Gio Urshela and Rendon are both third basemen. I know Rendon's played some second base in his career. Rendon might, since he's dealt with the injury so much, he might DH some this year, if I had to guess. But we'll see what ends up happening. But I mean, they're both pretty solid players. So I know Urshela did play some shortstop in 2021, maybe,
He
I
played 2
believe.
games there this year.
Yeah, I think the
Um,
Yankees had him playing shortstop some
yeah,
though, and or their plan was to play him at shortstop some, and maybe the Angels feel like he could be more of a kind of a utility infielder type too. So second base maybe with Fletcher can play short or something, or they like we talked about earlier, they might go into the shortstop market. But they definitely needed something, and they traded a guy who, I mean, Hidalgo is, he's a
He's
top
good.
20 prospect for them, but he's got high strikeout numbers in A ball. So kind of a project, far away guy, high walk rate, command's not really there yet, but maybe he ends up being something down the road. It's kind of hard to say. So
yeah, I think it's going to be one of those utility infield type things. I think there was some rumblings that maybe he was going to potentially be the second baseman, and then Fletcher was going to be shortstop. Um, but plenty of time to figure that out on what they're actually going to do there in the long term with that one. But that's pretty much it for the roster moves that we've had as far as the completed trades and signings that we've had so far. One little bit of news that we did, it's something we mentioned throughout the year, was Bryce Harper. He had that right elbow injury. It was stated, I believe, last Wednesday, I believe, by one of the Philly reporters that he will be having UCL surgery this upcoming Wednesday. So tomorrow, as we're technically recording this, they're not sure if it's going to be Tommy John surgery or not. So they're not quite sure of a timetable. But it's probably fair to say that he'll miss the start of the season at least. Anybody?
I
Anyone
mean,
say that?
yeah,
yeah,
it's tough, but he'll be back. And the Phillies it just showed us that you don't have to win all your games to get to the World Series. So I think they'll be okay without him for maybe a month, maybe.
yeah, I think part of it depends on if it's Tommy John. It probably limits him from being able to play the outfield much at all next year. He'd probably have to DH all year again, which does hurt the Phillies a pretty good bit because of having Schwarber and regular season Castellanos defensively. So I think that's tough if you're the Phillies to have those guys playing corner outfield again and not DHing. But obviously I guess it's possible that he could be back to being able to throw sometime during the next season where he could play outfield again. So we'll see what happens there. Not ideal, but I mean, your Harper's value is in his bat. I mean, he's really only a marginally better defender than Schwarber and Castellanos. He's better for sure, but he's not like some elite defender or anything. So that's not really why you've got him. And if he can play, maybe miss the first month or something from his surgery, depending on what it is. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. The only thing that really does hurt too is the fact that he might miss a bit of off season, just workouts and stuff, which could affect him next year. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully he recovers quickly and is back to being himself soon. So
Yeah, just hoping that it's not Tommy John
yeah,
for sure in that one. But let's go ahead and jump to the non-tenders, and then we'll come back to the awards there at the end. But the non-tender deadline was this last Friday. We've had some real notable names, be non-tendered here. We had a former MVP, a home run champ, some good top prospects or former top prospects at least. So we'll go ahead and start with the big one. And I know David's itching to say
Oh
this
yeah.
one, and I don't want to talk about it. So if David mysteriously disappears in the middle of talking, I didn't do it. I promise. Wink, wink. But that's with the Los Angeles Dodgers non-tendering 2019 NL MVP Cody Bellinger.
It's okay. I'm gonna butter him up. I'm gonna talk good
Oh,
about him.
I know. I'm not ready for this. All right.
I know. It's tough, right? But Cody Bellinger is coming to the free agent market is an incredible opportunity for about 25 teams. How often do former MVPs come available as free agents in their 20s with a guarantee for a 1-year deal. I would say this is either unprecedented or maybe once before in a different weird situation, but I can't recall the last time that a former MVP is on for a 1-year deal in his 20s. Like Bryce Harper signed for 13 years. This is a huge opportunity for a ton of teams. We talked about the Blue Jays. Obviously, I'm going to mention the Cubs. They have a need in center field. They just DFA'd Rafael Ortega, but there's a fit on every team that doesn't already have a superstar center fielder, where you could be the team to be Cody Bellinger's change of scenery team that he goes to and figures it out. And that would give you either first chance to trade him at the deadline if you were a team that's selling, or a team that is contending gets a guy who has MVP upside with Gold Glove defense in center field. This is a massive opportunity, and it absolutely shakes the floor of the free agent pool, where I think a lot of teams have turned their attention to this. The question is Cody Bellinger fixable? Can you get that swing to at least be a league average bat, because he hasn't been league average in a couple of years, and it's tough to see that happen because Cody Bellinger was a superstar. I mean, this guy came up as a 22-year-old and just dominated. So that's there. This is not like a lot of people are complaining, and I've seen it, especially in the Cubs fandom, of people are like, "Oh, $20 million for a center fielder. That's crazy." This is an opportunity to sign a guy who could win the MVP this year because he's already done it. So you can't overpay for this opportunity. I don't think any team can overpay for Cody Bellinger this season because if he doesn't perform, he's not going to get a big free agent deal, but he'll be a free agent next year, right? Like, he can absolutely go out there and earn himself a long-term contract. He just needs to prove that he can go out and erase the memories of 2021 and 2022 versions of it.
Yeah. So I don't 100% agree, but I agree to a certain level. I think that you definitely can overpay for Cody Bellinger depending on what your team's payroll is and what they're looking at, because I don't think there's a very high chance that Cody Bellinger is good this year. I think there's a chance that he's okay. Last year in 2022, with the factoring in the defense, he was okay. I mean, he was abysmal at the plate again, but his defense and base running helped him become maybe a regular everyday player. 2021, he was one of the worst players in baseball. A 47 WRC plus. 2020. He was pretty mediocre, but he wasn't awful. 2019 obviously was his MVP year. He really hasn't been a star level player since 2019. 2020 he was probably an above average player, and since then he's been not good. So I mean, his swing is so broken right now. I don't think it's something that you could just immediately snap your fingers and find something and fix. Now, what a team could do is, I think that the market that works for him is teams that have a lot of money to spend payroll wise this year, and have an opening in center field that are maybe wanting to compete again. Like a team like you mentioned the Cubs, I think that's a good landing spot for Cody Bellinger, or maybe the Rangers, teams that have a lot of money to spend this offseason, and they could take on that reclamation project, because teams like the Braves or the Astros or the some of those types of teams that are pretty close to their limit on payroll, they're probably going to be needing to maximize value on their deals. They can't take on $15 to $20 million that's going to be potentially just thrown out the window, because this is a high risk player. But if he hits and he turns back into, say, 2018 Cody Bellinger, then he's fantastic. So we'll see what happens. I think that this is a move that could be one of the best moves of the offseason, but and depending on what team it is, could be a bad move. But I think it's hard for it to be a bad move on a 1-year deal if it's not costing you the opportunity to do something else this offseason. Like, for example, like if it's costing you the ability to sign, if you have the payroll space to sign Carlos Correa, and then you go out and sign Cody Bellinger instead, and that limits your ability to sign Correa, then that's stupid. But signing Cody Bellinger, if you've got a ton of money to spend, then I think that's a great move to make, because it's 1-year deals are at low risk. So, but we'll see what happens. I think I think there's a chance he figures it out, but I think it's a fairly low chance. But
You're paying for that chance though with
Yeah.
that
Oh
bigger
yeah.
salary. Is how often do you sign a guy for a 1 year deal with the knowledge that there's absolutely a non-zero chance that this guy goes out and is the best player in the league this year? It never happens. That's
Yeah.
not something that happens. It doesn't matter whether that's a 1 year deal for $1 million or a 1 year deal for 20.
Yeah.
That does not happen.
I agree. That's why
So
I mean, if you go back off his last 2 years, he's going to get a 1 year, $2 million deal. If
right.
you're going off of his history in total, that's it's like a $15 million bet that he's going to figure it out. I mean, so you're gambling,
Ain't my
but
money.
well, yeah. I mean, I just saying in general. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
hey, that's what I say all the time. It ain't my money. I mean, the Braves
Yeah.
should have a $500 million payroll. It ain't my money. But
Well,
if
the Braves
your
managed to
team,
sign guys to seem friendly
yeah,
deals, but
if you're, well, yeah, it's true. But if your ownership,
yeah.
I don't want to get into that discussion because we don't have all night. But if your ownership has a limit, and you say, well, and you say your ownership says you can have to keep it under 230 or else, and you sign Cody Bellinger when you're already at 200, then that's dumb. So
That's fair, and that's why I didn't say like every team should sign him, but like this is an opportunity that imagine the Pirates signed him, right? And he goes to Pittsburgh and figures something out.
All right,
and
David,
then
stop. I'm gonna kick
I
you out of here.
know, but like then they trade him at the deadline for something bigger, and he can go without qualifying offer into free agency next season.
Trade him to the Dodgers for Amaya.
he could still get qualifying offered, but
not if you get traded midseason.
Let me like. I have so much I could say about this. Cody Bellinger is my favorite player in the league, so I am very unhappy about this from the Dodgers fan perspective. But to say that Cody Bellinger is completely broken is, from a guy who's watched him every single day, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Cody Bellinger this year, even with as broken swing as everyone wants to say, he still hit 19 homers. He hit 27 doubles. He's doing that off of rehabbing a shoulder surgery from 2020 offseason, or the 2020 postseason into 2021 offseason. He had the shoulder surgery there, was rehabbing that, wasn't 100% when the season started, was playing through that, and then got his leg fractured. Played most of 2021 through a hairline fracture in his right leg. Okay. Then this year, still hit 19 homers. Still, he ended up getting back to stealing bases, stole 14 bases there. We want to say about his 27% strikeout rate there. The thing about watching Bellinger, if you just look at the strikeout rate, you say, oh, that's bad. He's not walking and he's striking out a lot because his walk rate has dropped down to 7%. Cody Bellinger worked the at-bats a lot more than he's ever worked at-bats in his career. He was 10th in the major leagues in pitches per plate appearance this year. So he was consistently working deep into counts. The only hole that he really, really had this year in his swing, the only hole that it was what people took advantage of every single time, and if you could fix this one thing about his swing, he would go back to being a at least 250 hitter, and I bet he hits close to 30 home runs, was getting him to shorten up and hit a high fastball. A fastball at 97 or above at the top of the zone is what he struggles with. If you throw it middle to low in the zone, he is very, very good at that. And he's able to shorten up his swing and take it the other way on certain ones if it's away. And if it's in, he's able to pull that. He still has all the power in the world. He still has his speeds come back now that he's not on a fractured leg anymore. If he has a healthy offseason, with his shoulder, no leg, no rehabbing, and working the entire offseason on a swing, could you imagine what you're going to get out of a guy who, with as broken as everyone's saying he is, still hit 20 homers this year, still stole about the amount of bases he was stealing when he was the MVP, and played just about as good defense as he's ever played in his career?
92nd percentile and outs above average in center field, by the way.
I mean, he's a great defensive and base runner. I'll give you that. And when I say broken, I mean at the plate, in the field, and he's not a broken player. He's not a bad player.
I'm saying broken is his swing. I keep hearing broken swing. His swing's not broken.
Yeah.
If you cannot hit a
leg
high fastball, it is. I mean,
no, his swing's not broken. He has a hole in his swing. If his swing was broken, he wouldn't hit 19 homers.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, and 27 doubles. Like you wouldn't do that with a broken swing, right? I mean, a change of
I
scenery.
mean,
I think he needs a change of scenery for sure.
Yep.
He needs a full off season of not rehabbing an injury, which he hasn't had since that 2020 season, and get him into a thing where he's able to actually focus that off season
yeah,
on factoring into the high fastball thing, which has always been a hole in his swing. The high fastball's always been a problem for him. Not gonna, I mean, I will say that, but this it's been worse the last couple years.
yeah.
Can you get it back to what it was in that 2019 era? There's absolutely still room there for that.
He's very much a project, and
Yeah.
the from but what I am encouraged by was that in 2022 everything started trending the right direction. The exit velocity went up, the hard hit rate went up, the pitches per plate appearance went up. This is not a guy who's buried and dead. I think there's very much a lot of room here to improve, and um, like I said, when you've got a guy has the tools to go in and win an MVP available for a 1 year deal, there's going to be a lot of suitors. This is going to be one of the most interesting free agent spots and landing spots. And as a Cubs fan, which is a team that needs left-handed power and center field defense, this is a perfect storm of opportunity. I'm high on it. I'm excited about it. The Blue Jays are going to be suitors. The Dodgers might still come back for him. Like there's a lot of still opportunity for other teams to go in, and that's why I just want to say like this is the massive opportunity for if your team needs some center field help or is looking to add that kind of pop that can take them over the top. This is the kind of move that you got to be excited about.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he's the for sure probably the top bounce back candidate for the free agency market right now. But looking at other notable non-tenders, we had Dominic Smith from the Mets, who had a really good 2020, has really struggled to crack the lineup for them the last couple of years consistently. Luke Voigt, we had a 2020 home run champ for the New York Yankees. Got traded to the Padres this year, and then got traded at the deadline for as part of that Juan Soto deal. And then Alex Reyes, who was a former top prospect for the Cardinals, starter, was never able to stay healthy, been relegated to the bullpen. And then the last kind of big name was Heimer Candelario, who was really good the last couple seasons for the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say Heimer Candelario's, in 2021 had put up 4 wins above replacement. Was a really solid player. Had good numbers. He's a former top prospect. I don't know why Detroit would just give up on him after 1 year that he was bad. Because, I mean, I don't, they need players who are not bad. So I don't know why they would non-tender him. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. And another guy on there, Brian Anderson, too. He has had a rough couple of years, but he's been a pretty valuable player before too. So I mean, he's a guy that I probably he's kind of a borderline non-tender. If I would have non-tendered him, he's dealt with a lot of injuries the last couple of years, but when he's been on the field, he's been a fine player. He's been about a league average hitter. This year he wasn't great, but 2018 to 2021, he was an average to above average hitter. Played good defense. Has a really good arm. So I'm a little surprised Miami non-tendered him. Although when it comes to Miami, they just don't have the money to to pay armed guys if they're not key pieces of their team. So I get why they did it, but those are a couple guys that I might take a look at as potential, as potential guys to maybe take a chance on, along with obviously not to the level of Bellinger, but along with Bellinger.
Jeimer Candelario hit 42 doubles in 2021. He led the AL in doubles. Really like him. He was a Cubs prospect back when Chris Bryant was playing third base for the Cubs. So they shipped him off to Detroit to try to get better, and he made himself a nice little career there. And I'm certainly hoping he comes home. But I think he's another one where there's a lot of good opportunity there. Detroit's such a cavernous ballpark. That guy hit 40 some odd doubles there. Give him a shorter porch or another equally, a better hitters friendly park, and he might go nuts. So I really like Jeimer Candelario for any third base needy team this offseason.
Yeah, I mean there were some other non-tenders, but those are the big, real notable ones. It'll be interesting to see how their markets develop from there, and we'll go ahead and and move on to the awards, because I know we want to hit on this before we get too long on this episode. But we'll go ahead and start with the rookies of the year. We had Michael Harris win in the National League, and in the American League, we had Julio Rodriguez. No big surprises on either one of those awards, but what did you guys take from those votings?
Well, I think when it comes to the NL Rookie of the Year, it would have been really, really interesting to find out who would have won it if Spencer Strider didn't get hurt in early September, because I think they were really neck and neck. And I think just because Michael Harris was healthy in September, had a pretty good month, I think it kept him from. It gave it to Michael Harris. That would have been really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I wish Adley Rutschman had started the season in Baltimore. I think in
Yeah.
that case, that would have been a real close race. Also, shout out to Jeremy Pena and Stephen Kwan for being really, really good rookies that just didn't have a chance, because Julio Rodriguez went absolutely crazy this year. Also, Bobby Witt had a 2020 season and didn't even make the
Yeah.
top three. So that's
Yeah,
crazy.
I was gonna say, is it not crazy that we were talking so much about Bobby Witt before the season, and he wasn't even a top three rookie? I mean,
Yeah.
and he was still pretty good. I mean, he wasn't. I don't know if he quite lived up to the like what people were hyping him up to be as a rookie. I'm not saying he's bad or anything. I think he's going to be a great player in the big leagues, but
Yeah.
just he definitely had some more adjustment time than some people thought he might, who were hyping him up a lot, and he was still fourth and probably the fourth or fifth best rookie. It's pretty crazy. So
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Now let's jump over to the Cy Young Awards, which were pretty much hands down the two easiest awards we could have picked. I mean, maybe an AL MVP, but Sandy Alcantara won in the NL, and in the AL, Justin Verlander won there. Both runaway candidates as well. And we've talked a bunch about both of them on the show this year.
yeah, in the NL, Sandy Alcantara definitely deserved to win. I was kind of surprised Max Fried was the number two. Finished second in it. I think he obviously had a great season and was deserving. I also kind of thought Carlos Rodon, maybe, and Damien won't agree with this, but I thought Carlos Rodon maybe should have been a finalist over Urias. But I mean, I could see either argument. I think part of it's more of Urias getting a lot of the older votes because of the win total he had, which I mean, fair enough. He's on a great team, so but Sandy it didn't matter because Sandy Alcantara easily was going to win, and then Justin Verlander. This kind of went back to that innings debate again, but he was still the best pitcher in the AL, and congrats to him. I think this is his third one, and coming off of Tommy John, just once again, how incredible was it for him? He also got his first World Series win, which is kind of crazy too. He had never had a pitcher win in the World Series, even though he's a world champion already. But I thought that was pretty crazy. But
My only thought here is that Marcus Stroman tweeted me about this like 3 weeks ago before the awards were even announced, that exactly this was going to happen, and so he was right. That's all I gotta say.
All right, then. Yeah, Julio deserved to be second over Max Fried. Just saying.
Well, he
So we'll go
wasn't.
ahead and,
So
well, he should be. I mean, he had 2.16 ERA. But
Let's go.
anyways, let's jump over to the NL MVP. We had Paul Goldschmidt win there, and then in the AL MVP was probably the easiest award people could have predicted. It was Aaron Judge, and I don't think there was really any question about that one either.
Man, Shohei Ohtani was actually better this season than he was last season too,
yeah,
which is insane. But the dual impact of the pitcher and the hitter, I don't think we have an appropriate value for, and we already awarded Shohei Ohtani, the MVP for doing it, and then Aaron Judge went and had the best offensive season since Barry Bonds, so and hit 62 home runs for the first time in the American League since Roger Maris, or ever actually. So, you have to give it to Aaron Judge, but man, Shohei Ohtani does deserve some credit for that awesome season, and then Manny Machado, kind of single-handedly pulled the Padres into the playoffs there with Fernando Tatis going down and Juan Soto going on a slump as soon as they acquired him. And, Manny does deserve some credit. I think he probably had a case to beat out Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt a little better on offense, Manny playing that third base defense. But, Goldschmidt deserving MVP because he's deserved it before and not gotten it. So it's nice that Goldschmidt does finally get it, even though, he does it for the Cardinals.
yeah, that was cool for Goldschmidt to finally win. He's been really close a bunch of times. Goldschmidt actually was third out of the three players in WAR this year that were finalists. Him, Manny Machado, and Nolan Arenado. He actually was third. And he's actually tied with Freddie Freeman for third in
Right.
the NL in WAR. Which, obviously Paul Goldschmidt had the best offensive season. He did run a pretty high batting average on balls in play, which obviously that's not really a factor in the award, but just in general, kind of looking forward. But I think you honestly could have made a case for all three of them because Nolan Arenado was back to being like an elite defensive player this year. And, I think that Manny Machado obviously carried a playoff team into the playoffs when he probably shouldn't have. And, but Paul Goldschmidt had a great year. Just a 177 WRC plus. He was fantastic. So congrats to him. And I mean, the Judge Otani debate, I think Judge was so far and beyond the best hitter in the league that it almost and playing good defense too, and good base running. Like you, I just don't think you can. I mean, I don't think you could take away what he did, and you have to give him the MVP. I mean, it was the best offensive season in 20 years, and it's not like he was playing. If he was DHing or something, maybe you throw Tani up there, but like he was playing center field half the time, so I mean, he was phenomenal. So I mean, 100%. I think Aaron Judge deserved it. And then I don't even know. I guess did Jordan was the other finalist too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jordan had
So
another just
he was
incredible
fantastic.
season. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and Jordan would have been really maybe even closer. I won't say close to Judge or anything, but he would have been closer if he missed like 30 games almost. So dealt with a little bit of injury, but he was fantastic too. So
Yeah, I wonder how much the home run record, was factored into. Like, if Judge
yeah,
hit 50 instead of 62, what does that look like then? Does
what
Otani win it? Because I'm
Otani wins if he
sure.
hits 50.
Yeah, I think it's because he
what
won
about
62.
60?
60. I
60 on
think
the money instead of
I think
62.
Judge wins if he hits
It's
60.
60, I think. Yeah, I mean,
Same
I think it's
same
probably mid
WRC
50s.
plus.
I think
Yeah.
in mid 50s are probably right there.
All
Is
right.
where the
Yeah.
transition mark would be. It's really interesting. It's really hard to predict what the pitching side of Otani means compared to the other side
Yeah.
of what anyone else to do. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're talking about the most valuable player every single year, then it's going to be Otani because he's literally going to be the most valuable player on field wise. But who had the best season? That's the question, that the age old question for the MVP voting for
Yeah.
sure.
I think this is one of those cases where WAR does come into pretty good value because, you know, I know it's not perfect, but you can add Otani's pitching WAR to his, WAR as a position player, as a DH, and I think it that tries to get a good value on how good he is. If you add them together, I think he was like 9 this year, so um, which is typically an MVP year, and he'll probably be at 9 just about every year. So he's very good, and obviously Judge is, but Judge, he put up 11 WAR this year. It was like the best season
Mhm.
in forever. So
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're not fully aware of how valuable that having an ace starting pitcher and a guy who can hit 30 to 40 homers is on your team yet, because only one guy has ever been able to do it. So we have nothing to compare it to. That
Yeah.
kind of versatility. It's like having like a guy who can play, shortstop and third base, like a Ben Zobrist type of guy, but to be able to fill out your starting rotation with that guy is just it's I don't know if we can properly quantify it. What we do have tells us that Aaron Judge was the MVP, and Shohei Ohtani still had a better year than he got the MVP for last year. So that's all I have. Just to let's keep it in perspective how good Ohtani is, while saying Aaron Judge just had maybe the best season since Barry Bonds.
yeah,
It is. So just a housekeeping thing, when we record in 2 weeks, the winter meetings will be happening from December 5th to December 8th. Our next episode will be on the 6th. There's been some rumblings the last week or so saying that Aaron Judge could sign before the winter meetings even. So it'll be interesting. And if that happens, we'll definitely be back beforehand and with an episode. But anything else you guys want to hit on, or you kind of mention before we head off for the next couple weeks?
I don't think so. I think everything's kind of moving at a normal off-season pace right now. Last year was obviously weird because of the lockout, so but I think everything's moving along kind of decently, and looking good for going into next year, and I think it's going to be an exciting off season. A lot of good good moves, and excited to see where some of these players end up. So be coming up pretty soon.
2023 is still my oyster. It could be anything. It could be great. It could be terrible. So I just want the Cubs to do something at this point. I think that's how
Yeah.
we all feel. Is we're all like, what are they gonna do? So
Yep.
let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready to see some of these moves. I think Judge may be the first domino to fall, and that'll be useful. I think for those shortstops who really want to get paid.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.